setting it up.
Do we need to click on anything, or we're good?
We're good to go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this, I don't know, interesting conversation. I'm sure it'll be interesting. I'm Megan. I am a pastor at Highrock, and I am so glad to be here with my two friends, Dr. Kellie Carter Jackson and Pastor Dani Kilgore. I don't know, we've been talking, both of, like, me separately with both of them over the course of, I don't know, the last year or so, just about the rise of perceived conflict, I think, that has been, that, like, we've talked about division in the church all the time, more now, that there is just like increased feelings of separateness, and now we're on the other side of the election, and we hear everybody asking, like, hey, now this is the time for unity. It's a time for peace. And I'll just, like, say, as a white woman who is a pastor of, like, a white church, it's interesting to hear that dialogue coming from different spaces where some of my white friends are just asking, like, why does it feel like there's still conflict coming from my Black friends? And I've heard other things from my Black friends. And so just thought that it would be interesting to hear from you two, being some of the most grounded and integrated humans that I know, who just know who you are. Your faith is centered, the central part of that. And you both worship and work in primarily white spaces as Black women. So I feel like there is something that you all could help just teach us about what it's like to do that. And so if we could just start with you all introducing yourselves, that would be super.
I'm going to go second. My daughter's knocking on the door. And
Good. Yeah.
Motherhood. We love motherhood. I'm Dani Kilgore. I serve as a pastor of outreach and missions in, it's right outside of San Francisco, California, but it's in Marin County. And I've been serving at that church for almost 3 years. I'm originally from Texas, but moved from California, from Atlanta, Georgia. My husband, William, is from Atlanta. We met after college, and I just stayed there until God called me to pastor in California at my church there. I also serve on the Revelation 7 team for Highrock as well. So I'm on that faculty for them there. Thanks for having me.
So hi, I just got my daughter to go back to bed. I have a 3, almost 4-year-old. My son is 6, and my youngest is 10 months old. And I can tell you how long we've been going to Highrock because my 4-year-old was almost 6 months old when we started coming. So I sort of gauge it by how old Jojo is. But we've been in the Boston area about the same amount of time, about 4 years. Wellesley College brought us to the area. I'm a professor at Wellesley College in the Department of Africana Studies. I'm a historian. I write books mostly about the 19th century, but my bread and butter is violence. I know that sounds kind of bad to say, but like I am obsessed with the topic of political violence and oppressed people and protests and movements and how we understand these sort of really complicated ideas. And so I'm really excited to be in this conversation. When we were looking for churches and we came to the Boston area, one of our former pastors had recommended Highrock. And so we came one Sunday in Arlington, and I remember being blown away because Pastor Dave was talking about like racism and how polarizing and political it was. And I was like, what? Never heard a white man talk about this. And then I remember, I don't know who the woman was, but someone was dedicating their child and they were talking about their white privilege. And I was like, what church is this? So we kept coming back because I was like, oh, clearly these people get it. So, and we never really looked at any other church.
Well, I mean, I'm super grateful to call you both friends and to have you both invested in our church um, for different reasons. And yet it does feel like sort of ordained. Um, so I don't know. Can we just get right into this? Is that okay?
Yeah.
I think that there are a couple of things that might be helpful for people listening if we just kind of define them a little bit. So when we talk about what makes something comfortable for someone or uncomfortable, there's a really helpful framework that I like to think about, like a grid of invitation and challenge. So if you imagine like the horizontal axis is invitation and the vertical axis is challenge. For certain personality types, you can be like a super high challenge person. And you want to go there and you feel like you're growing and you're excited and you can enter in. And for other people, like keep me in like high invitation, low on the challenge. I want to be comfortable. And everybody's like their temperament is different, but also there is something that we don't necessarily pay attention to a lot of like how our enculturation also like gives us a baseline of being comfortable with challenge. So I think just like naming that most of us, when we're under pressure, will turn to going to a place of comfort, right? We're going to want to like feel invited into going into harder places. And so you just ramp right up into hard space. It's hard for people to follow you there. The second concept that we have to talk about is this concept of like white space. And if we can't start to link these two ideas of like invitation and challenge and like being not white in white spaces, we might not ever be able to like come to an understanding of how we could see a way of shared experience here. So just like framing that, would either of you be able to define like white space for us as you understand it?
I mean, for me, it's the American norms. So like, it's not having to define yourself at all. It's not having to really, your very existence is the status quo as a white person in America. And so no explanation is needed. No one's really going to ask, where are you from? No, really, where are you from? You know, like you are assumed to be the standard and the norm. And everyone else sort of has to explain themselves in relationship to who you are. And so I don't think we realize how much, I say this a lot, but white space is it's gravity. So it's like that unseen force that really holds everyone down in a lot of ways. But it's also something that if you're not paying attention to it, no one walks around feeling gravity, right? So it can be very insidious, but it can also be very innocuous in the way that it expresses itself or presents itself, I should say.
I wonder like, so for me then, right, like I would walk around and not recognize that. But is that how you experience that yourself?
No, you are always aware that you are in white space. That's not, you cannot not notice it.
How old were you when you started to notice that? Like, how did you learn to navigate it?
So I'm from Texas, like I said, and I was raised in Arlington, Texas, which is a suburb of right out of Dallas Fort Worth area. And at that time, it was predominantly white. My neighborhoods were predominantly white. My schools were predominantly white. I didn't have my first African American teacher until junior high. And so living in Texas, you were always aware that you were in white space. White space surrounded me. It overwhelmed me to the point to where you had to choose. Do I fight back and say, I don't want to be in this space? Or like most, to survive, do I assimilate so that I can just fit in? and it doesn't affect me as much. And that's what I did. I mean, I had to do that. I remember in elementary school in fifth grade, uh, living, brought being brought to my attention the types of clothes that I wore, the shoes that I wore, the food that I ate, because we had just moved from Arkansas, with in the country with all my, my family and everything, and so I didn't see anything wrong with it. But immediately I told my mom, I have to, you got to take me to the store because I have to wear soccer shorts and soccer shirts. And I need an igloo lunchbox because that's what all the white kids was wearing, and they had, and I didn't want to be I didn't want to be pushed aside or singled out as different. I needed to be like them so that I could have friends, I could have community. Um, and I think that was around the time where, for me, I experienced white space. Um, as a fifth grader, I experienced it then. But I was raised by, well, what I like to say, a woman. I like to say my mother is Angela Davis in a suit. So my mother was a businesswoman, but she was Angela Davis. So I was always aware of these things. But it wasn't until fifth grade where it was like, oh, that's what she means. Okay. But it took until then. But it was always here because of my mom.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I would say the same to me. I feel like I realized much younger when I was in all white spaces where literally the only other Black students were my siblings. And the only reprieve was that I'm one of 7. And so I'm the youngest. And so I could point to other Black kids, but I lived with them, they're my sisters. So, but I remember being in kindergarten, and it was, a seemingly harmless activity where the teacher was like, everyone bring in a picture of your baby photo and we're gonna guess who's who. And if you're the only Black kid in the class, and I remember actively thinking, of course, at 5, you don't have the language to articulate like these differences or these value ideas. But I told my mom I have to get the picture of the day I was born because it was when I was like the palest. And I was like, maybe they won't know that I'm like Black, which is ridiculous because I came out chocolate. But that of I wanted them to be able to guess my identity. I didn't want it to be tricky. And I knew that when we played the game and everyone's like, well, I know who that is, and it wasn't necessarily a negative game. It wasn't a game where, people were making fun of me, but I was hyper aware of my difference and the fact that I was not the same color and that I was not someone who could sort of blend in. And so, but my mom always really made me confident about my identity. So when I was young, and because I'm dark skinned, my mom would always say, oh my gosh, you're beautiful. Oh my gosh, your skin is gorgeous.
Same here. Mm-hmm.
So that I don't remember this, but when I was 3 years old, I had ice skating lessons, or maybe 4. I only see it through pictures, so that's all I remember. But she I was the only Black girl. We're all in like tutus doing like ice capades or whatever. And all of these girls are staring at me because I'm the only Black girl. And I said, oh, are you staring at me because I'm so pretty? Are you saying I look so cute? Because I look so good? And my mom cracked up because she's like, we did a good job with her, because like it hadn't impacted me yet. But the moment I got to the first grade, I started, like coloring my princesses white with blonde hair and all of that. And I've told this story before. I made a white princess at like 5 or 6, and my mom said, and I brought it to my mom and said, don't you love this picture? Don't you? And she was like, no, it's ugly. And I was like, what? Like, have you ever heard a mom say your picture is ugly? And she's like, make her brown like you. So I colored her over brown and I gave her Black hair. And then my mom was like, oh, she's beautiful. She's so pretty. She looks like you. Like that was the very hyper intentional space that I lived in, because my mom was trying to constantly combat the white space around me to let me know that, like, yes, I'm Black and I can be a princess, and yes, you're Black, but you're special and you're beautiful and you're all of this stuff. But all throughout my childhood going forward, hyper aware of that. Now, I didn't always attribute it to something negative, but I definitely knew I was the odd girl out.
So I hear like both, amazing things about how both of your mothers really were formative in shaping that initial grounding of self, and like makes so much sense with childhood development, right? Like that's where we understand our first value of self is what happens in our home in our earliest experiences. And like then we all grow up, right? And we all start to push against the things that we were given in home, and we start to question a lot of that. And so as you've gotten older, as you've navigated life now, you're both married, you both have children of your own, you both are settled professionally and continuing to like climb in those ranks. How do you stay grounded in such a way that you could both, also say like, I'm beautiful, I'm special, I'm Black, and I'm a princess, right? Like it's all congruent here. Like, what are those practices for you that help you remember that like you are made in God's image in that way?
Well, first I say that we have elevated from princess to queen.
Yes.
Queen.
Yes.
Okay.
That
Crown on. Okay. We're not princess no more. We bossing it up and queens now in the name.
My apologies.
Okay. You are queen too. But no, but I think that being in space with other women, other African American women, women of color, that's what grounds you. That's what gives that confidence and that power and that build that you just need to keep going, because it's hard being the only. It's hard trying to pursue, knowing that there's so much around you that's causing you or wanting you not to pursue, not to succeed. It's hard, that's why when you shared with me about Kelly, I was looking it up. I was like, I got to meet her first because I can't fangirl in front of the people, right? Because everything about her is just giving me so much confidence. Everything about who she is just, it's confirming or affirming, yes, you can do it, Black woman. Yes, you can, little Black girl, you can succeed, you can do it. And when you see more women being those examples of, yes, I knocked down that wall and I can, and because I did, you can too. That's that confidence, that's that build, that's that motivation. And it's all comes from our faith in God. It all comes from our connection to, and our relationship with Jesus, because he puts those people in your space, like right when you feel like you want to quit and give up, he sends those people. I can remember being in seminary and how hard it was, because I had not had a professor of color. I had not had an African American professor. And it was just hard. I am the only African American in my cohort, and African American woman. So all of the questions come to you, and it gets hard and it's challenging. And I was at a breaking point. And my professor, we didn't know who she was. I didn't know who she was an African American woman. Her name was Dr. Deborah Penny. And I was just like, she felt like auntie. I was like, oh wow. And I remember praying like, God, I just need you to lift me. And he sent her. And I talked to her and I was saying, oh, you have no idea. She said, oh, baby, I do know. I understand exactly what you feel. And I remember just breaking down, crying. And I didn't realize how much my spirit yearned to be in space with other Black women who understood what I was going through and could give me that confidence, that motivation, that the faith that I needed to keep going. So I know for me, being around other African American women definitely gives me that for sure.
I agree. I say this a lot, and maybe some people won't understand when I say it, but I've never wanted to be the only Black person in the room. And I say that because there are some Black people that do. And because they enjoy the privilege, or privilege is a sticky word, but like they enjoy the being the only, and the power and the privilege that gives them to be able to dictate what happens around other white people. I've never liked being in that space or really around those kind of people. But for me, I everything goes back to, and I know I talk about this a lot, but Howard University, because I went to all white schools. It got a little bit better when we moved to Texas. I was in College Station, Texas, not about an hour or so out of Houston. And there were more Black kids, but still not a lot. And not a lot that were college bound or that were going to, you know, go necessarily. And when I went to Howard, it was the first time I was surrounded by people that shared my identity. And this is not just a Howard experience, because you went to Clark, Dani, but an HBCU experience. Being around people that shared my identity, shared my values, shared my faith, because it was a lot of Christians where I went, and that was huge for me. Being in a space like Washington, D.C., pre-gentrification, where I could legit go 2 weeks and not see a white person because of where we were, I needed that environment to just be built up, so that when I went to Columbia, when I'm at this like prestigious Ivy League school, and I am the only, again, like I was in high school and grade school, I had the confidence that I needed to say, I deserve to be in this space. I'm supposed to be in this space. Now, for the first couple of years, it was very, very hard to speak. In class, I didn't talk a lot at all, because I felt inadequate. And it took me a while to sort of get to a place where I'm like, oh, first of all, nobody knows what they're talking about. Second of all, there's no grad school. Everybody's like pontificating. But also that, like, I do have a lot to offer. I do have a different perspective. And as an adult, I work so hard to make sure that my children feel safe in these spaces, be that at home or at church or at school. They're the onlys. We live in a very white town. And so I am very, just like my mother, intentional about all of their books are Black people, or like children of color, or, you know, animals. We do have some white books, but it's a small percentage. And we don't have any white dolls, like none. And I'm very intentional about that too. You know, Jojo is turning 4 next week. And she's obsessed with Frozen. She's obsessed with princesses. So I found a Frozen cake on Etsy. And I emailed the woman and I said, listen, my daughters are African American. She's obsessed with Elsa. Can you make Elsa brown? She makes like the cake covers or whatever that go on top of the cake. And she was like, oh, absolutely, of course. Like, do you want her to have black hair? Or I was like, she can have silver hair, you know, that's fine. But I just want her to have a cake that looks like her. And she may think that this is weird now, or she may not pay attention to it at all, but she will when she gets older. And that to me matters. But I'm hyper aware. I feel like I can never turn off. I'm constantly having to like shore up these spaces where I can feel like I'm a child of God and like I belong and I'm special and I matter and I'm important, like, because the world just tells you you're not, over and over again. And that's hard to deal with day in and day out.
You know, that's good, because it's interesting how you talked about how your mom and my mom too were very intentional about making sure we knew that you're beautiful, you're smart, you can do it. No one's going to tell you you can't do it. You can do it. And you now, and I hear you talking about your daughter and how you do the same thing. And I'm like, gosh, okay, great. It's not just me.
All my friends do this too, though. You know, they're like, don't bring me white dolls in my house. And it's not because they don't like white people. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I'm trying to protect my daughter's imagination. And racism is so insidious that it doesn't even allow us to think about ourselves when we read fiction, to read the Hunger Games and not imagine Rue is Black. Like that, that seems superficial to some people, but we don't realize how much racism has impacted our ability to make believe, to think about who's in the future, to think about who can be in sci-fi, to think about who, not even in past, but like our present and our future, we get written out of the script. And so it's really important for me that she see, and my son too, my son, it matters just as much.
That feels like actually a very key piece to like maybe help in some of this translation of just recognizing the baseline challenge of raising children for you, of navigating your own identity, your own relationships, your own interactions, of saying like, I have to put these things in place in order to feel safe. Kelly, that I had this like image of just like building a fortress, right? That like inside of that fortress, I can let my guard down. I can be me. But most of my time and energy, that's maybe an overcorrection, is spent like making sure and ensuring that for my children also. It's not even necessarily about you anymore. And so I do think that like, I'm hearing that call to recognize how much of a challenge level that is daily. And so calls to unity, calls to peace, like it's different. It's not going to remove that challenge without some hard work there. I think that like one of the next questions, just as we've talked about how our country is in the middle of this next wave of the civil rights movement, that value of Black and brown bodies has been part of the conversation in our churches, in political spaces, and it's led to like global action, right? Like this is not just something that's located in the United States. This is taking on a global wave now. And so like, how do you experience in your work, in your personal relationships, how do you find like those places that value what spaces feel invitational to you, what spaces feel like rest to you, what spaces feel like they value you, your body, your children, right? Like for who you are. And then like, I guess just land there. Like what places are good for you? You mentioned like your relationships with your girlfriends, spaces in your family, like what else helps ground you in that and feel like safe spaces in the middle of this movement?
Go ahead, good doctor.
Okay. Okay, I'll go. For me, church has always been a safe space. Church has always, now I grew up in predominantly white, Black and white churches. For a part of my time, as a child, we went to a white church. And then we moved a lot when I was a kid. And then another part of my church was, or life was spent in a Black church. And then after that, it's been really a hodgepodge. It just depends on where we're living. But no matter where we live, we have never, ever been a part of a church and active in that church where I didn't feel welcome, where I didn't feel like a sister in Christ. That is very important to me and my husband. And part of the reason, like I said, we're at Highrock was because even though I'm well aware that there are a handful of Black families there, I have never felt like my children have been looked at as not having the same amount of value as other children. And that would have been a deal breaker for me because I don't mind if people mistreat me all the time, but my kids, like I'm very much. So when my kids are excited about coming home from church and it's unfortunate because the pandemic, I'm speaking about everything pre-pandemic, you should know, but like those things really matter to me. I have mommy's groups that are all Black mommy's groups. We have all Black, children, and we are on, group chats and we text daily. my sisters are a real safe space for me. But typically when, again, pre-pandemic, when we used to have people over our house all the time. My husband and I both have the gift of hospitality. We love having people over. And that is where people get to see me, my safest space in my home. And I think people are always shocked sometimes that when we have certain events, it's always going to skew more toward Black people than it is white people, the makeup. But white people are there, but the white people that are there are the people that have made me feel safe. The people I'm like, yes, I can invite you over to my house with all my Black friends. I don't have to worry about you saying something stupid, or I can trust that we can be in this space together and that we are all, because for a long time I couldn't do that. I was like, oh, are we gonna write so-and-so? Are we gonna write, I don't know, is she gonna be okay? You know what I mean? But that to me has just been a really a big deal. So I feel like I curate very carefully who I'm around and who I'm able to be myself with, and honest with, and really show that even the ugly parts of my identity and my flaws, and the parts of whiteness that are very difficult for me to deal with. If I can be honest with you about that and say, listen, this is racist, this is hurtful, and feel like that message is received, that's a safe space for me.
I would agree that, my church has always been my safe place, because I grew up in a Black church. So that was always the safest place for me. But, this is something that I am still seeking God to give to me, because there aren't Black families in my neighborhood. There aren't many Black, like my husband and my daughter and I make up one of maybe 4 Black families at our church, and everyone's so spread out. Like everyone lives really far away. Like Marin County stretches far, and then some people live in other cities and they commute into. So their life tends to be in their city, and they just come to church, right? So it gets harder that way. So I found myself really in a hard place when I first moved here, because I didn't have any place where I could just be myself. Just don't have to worry about, turning it on and turning it off. My home, like you said, Kelly, became that place. I could just be me with my husband. And my husband, he found a barbershop, and so now he has the barbershop, and so he's like, I'm like, how long it take to get a haircut? Like, he been going all day. But it's because that became his safe place. Like, that's his safe space, and we worked so hard to find a place like for him to find that. And it wasn't until I got connected to an organization called Jack and Jill, that I'm like, yeah, like my mom was intentional about putting me in that when
I was in Jack and Jill.
Yeah. So like, oh man, and then so you come together, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, you all, I don't have that many. My daughter and I don't have many.
Let me tell the people who Jack and Jill is. Tell
Oh
them
yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, yes. So Jack and Jill of America is an organization that was established by African American mothers who were focused on, lifting each other up about the values of being a mother, making sure that we care for our children together. We're very focus driven in making sure that they were exposed to different activities and events and things like that, so that as they, matriculated through their schooling and on up, they wouldn't feel, inadequate, or that they didn't know. And it became and for me, and then it also became like a place of unity for mothers when you're trying to navigate, raising children in white space. And so, yeah, my mother, she's like, I was talking to her about it, and she said, well, why don't you try to join Jack and Jill? It's like, oh, Jack and Jill. And that has been, these women have been such a blessing to me, because it's like, I just like being able to turn on Zoom and see more women that look like me. It's like, oh, and they understand, and they talk about their different experiences. I mean, a lot of these women, and then, you know, to add, you know, another layer, it's a difference when you are, you know, a Black mother at a certain level. And but then once you add on education and resource and having children, that adds a whole nother layer of separation, a whole nother layer of trying to teach your children a certain thing. And so being in Jack and Jill, I'm learning from these women who have been in this cycle of making sure that their children are seen and heard and valued in white space, and in as a I guess as a Black woman who is resourced or highly educated or is serves in a high position in their careers and things like that. And so that has been definitely a place. Oh, and then the other thing that I guess I would say that I found my foundation and my my spirit being lifted is there's a group that I was a part of called 30 for 30, which is part of our denomination. It's a group that they identified certain leaders within our spiritual leaders, developing leaders in our denomination. And it was about 6 of us who were African American. And it's like we saw each other and we just did this. I mean, we just kind of stuck to each other. And although I'm really good friends with the majority of all of the 30 for 30 leaders, that crew oh man, like we lean on each other. Our spouses lean on each other. I mean, we've become like a family of just friends, and it's been a blessing. And so, you know, I struggled for a while trying to find these places, and then God just slowly just started to bring in me little groups that I can lean on. I had to switch, you know, my spiritual director and my therapist from being a white women to being Black women, because this has to be my safe space. And I don't want there to be a place where I feel like I can't say because I feel like I'm going to offend you. Yeah. So I had to switch. And those are become my safe spaces as well. So I just needed my safe spaces to look and understand where I'm coming from in all facets of my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think you both, this just like sort of stuck out to me, like naming specifically white women, like the level of access and sort of like the intentional choosiness that you have around which white women get access to you and at what levels. But I do think that there's like a history there that we could talk about. If you can go there.
I'll go there. I mean, it's a dark history. I mean, I've talked about this before, but there's not a lot of trust between white women and Black women. There just is not. And we can take it all the way back to slavery because it has a lot of its genesis in that, part of that is because, women, there was no solidarity among women in slavery, meaning, you could be enslaved to a white family and the master, the husband is sleeping, I should say not sleeping, raping his enslaved property. And so white women resented Black women because they were seen as sexual temptresses to their husbands, even though their husbands are sexually assaulting them. And there was no reprieve from, I think the myth or the stereotype is that, oh, the mistress is so kind. Oh, she's off in a corner teaching the slaves how to read. And she feels so, no, the mistress was vicious. Like she stole off your children because they were, she was not your friend. And so when you fast forward past slavery into segregation and these, slavery has ended, but white supremacy is very much the order of the day. And it's white women that call rape against Black men when they're having consensual relationships. It's white women that, are really the foot soldiers of white supremacy in a lot of ways. They use their femininity, they weaponize it to claim particular kinds of power and control over Black people. That's a problem, especially when Black women continue to live in white women's houses all up through, today, really.
But take care of their children.
taking care of their children, but not being seen as fit mothers, but yet perfectly suited to take care of their children and raise
Mm-hmm.
children. The irony there, it's not lost on us. And then of course, you bring it back to present day, and we have these new terms that have become pejoratives, like Karens or Beckys. And they are, Beckys are the white women that sleep with Black men or whatever it is. Karens are the white women that are constantly policing Black people, calling the cops. There's a scary Black person in my neighborhood. I'm your neighbor. But that kind of conflict and tension is very difficult to get over when you're trying to develop friendships, because that history is so toxic and so present. And so this sounds bad to say, but like a lot of white women are guilty until proven innocent. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't trust you until I know that like my kid could date your kid. Not even date. My kid could play with your kid. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you can tell, like I'm hyper aware when kids at school are playing, and William's like, how come they didn't invite me? How come they didn't include me? Like, I'm like, is this because he's Black? Is this because what? Like I go there. But yeah, it makes it really hard. I will say though that my next door neighbor, Sarah, is white, and she has been so like upfront, not just about racism, but just like, I want you to know, like, I'm safe. You know what I mean? Like, I care for your children. I'm happy you're my neighbor. I'm so happy you're my neighbor. And I knew what she was saying when she was doing that. She was trying to signal like, please understand, like, I know what you must be thinking, like, but I'm trying to put you at ease. And that for me was really helpful, because it was like that subtle way of signaling, like, yes, of course our kids can play together. Yes, of course your kids can come over, and and her kids can come over my house and all of that stuff. Like, but that takes trust. It takes a lot of trust.
Yeah. But would you say that there's a difference with generations though? Because I find that more white women that are my age tend to be less of a threat than when they get, let's say, over 40.
I honestly, this is also going to sound bad, but like, I don't think racism has an age or a region. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot, I'll hear people say, oh my gosh, that's how they act in the South. No, it's how y'all act in Boston. Like, it's how you act in Chicago and in New York City. Like, racism to me is not regional, and it's not, there are young people that are well on their way to being white supremacists.
Yeah, you're right.
And there are older people I found that are more, now they may not always have the language, you know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
But it cuts both ways. I say, yes, that's probably predominant, but I always feel like people love me and my kids. But what happens when William's 16? That's my son. He's cute because he's 6. But like, what happens when he's of dating age, of driving age? What happens when he has a growth spurt? What happens when he's 12 but looks 16? These are the things that I worry about, because everyone loves kids, you think, but I want to know what these relationships will look like when we fast forward 10 years and William's 6-year-old and JoJo was 14. And when we're applying for colleges, what that looks like. Are my kids, they're just affirmative action to you, or do you believe my children are smart? Like, they're not competing for anything at 6. So the stakes are so low to be friends. But, and that's why I tell my college students, I'm like, the stakes are so low for you. You're not paying rent. You're not paying bills. You know what I mean? Not in real ways, but wait till you graduate and you get a job and you have to decide where you want to live based on the school district, because you got to be in a good school. Like, a lot of that determines what relationships you're going to have and how much access to diversity or not you will have,
Yeah. I think for me, I've gotten to an age where I'm like, you're just gonna get this is me. Like I think before I might have been careful about what I say around certain white friends and things like that. But now at this point, I'm so confident in who I am. I have embraced all of me and my identity that here is me in a golden platter. All of me though. And whatever I give to you, the way you respond tells me whether or not we can be friends.
Mm.
Um, you know, a lot of my friendships with, I'll say, with white women have started out of some form of conflict of some sort to where they were, that's how you feel. And yeah, that is, wow, let's have a conversation. Wow, that was so good. Wow, can you teach me? I want to learn, or wow, there's something about you, or whatever. And that's where our relationship has grew from.
Mm.
Megan, you and I's relationship grew from a I don't know what to call it, a conflict of some sort. And it was because I was like, where is white woman going with my black friend? Where's she going? That's exactly what I felt. I was on the like I was on the offense. Like, what's going on? Why is she in that room? And they gonna close the door? Oh no, I gotta wait. What's happening? And I had to check myself because I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know her. She don't know me. But immediately I felt like there was something that was gonna happen. It was something that didn't feel safe, and I didn't want my friend in there by herself.
Mm.
And when she came back and told me that, Megan was so kind and so understanding, and she just wanted to hear, and she had a heart of learning, and she was just very apologetic of what happened. That I was like, okay, now I need to get to know her and see who she is. And from there, we create a relationship and a friendship. And I remember telling Megan, I said, Megan, you're not like most white women I met. It's something about you. I don't meet many white women like you. And she didn't like when I said that at first. Like, I don't know, friend, it's something about you. She's like, no, it's nothing. I don't want it to be anything special. But there is. And the thing is, like you just said, Kelly, it's I can trust you.
Mm.
I can trust you.
Yeah.
I can trust you with all of me. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing about me that I have to minimize or
Mm-hmm.
diminish or hide. I don't have to. I can be all of me with you, and it does not make you feel threatened, and I don't feel threatened. We can
Yeah.
just be each other's friends. Just be friends.
Yeah.
And for me, that was great. And
Mm.
it I have another friend that's like I have a couple more white women, female friends. Look at me counting for white women friends. I'm sorry.
Collecting us along the way.
I didn't mean to do that, but I have another close friend that I've said that same thing to her. I'm like, it's something about you that I have not experienced before, and it's the trust. It's to
Yeah.
feel safe.
Yeah.
And that is just not the norm. It
No.
just isn't. I worked in a restaurant with all women, and constantly was there always an issue about nothing. Like there's always an issue about nothing. Only for it to come out, oh, you just being a Karen. You're just talking. You just doing it just because. And it was really hard. And I lived in Atlanta. I'm like, I'm around all African Americans, but you still had those white women that you would work with that still felt like they had the upper hand, even when there's so many of us, and
Yeah.
they still felt like they were held at a superior level in a sense.
But
It's like they felt like that.
I feel like my closest relationships with white women have developed, yes, out of trust, But that trust has almost always come from two things. One, Christ, usually Christ. But the second is struggle. And when I say struggle, I mean, I have a close friend who's Caucasian, and we bonded because we both lost our brothers. And that immediate, I know how you feel, I know how you feel, allowed us to be close, where we didn't always share the same political, and we still sometimes don't share the same political, ideas. But that grief bonded us in a way where I looked at her like, you have experienced loss. And she looked at me like, you have experienced the same kind of loss that I have. And we both love Jesus. And so we could connect over our shared faith in Jesus. But it's almost always women, I find, that have experienced something either painful or live with something painful, be it, either poverty, or maybe it's, mental health, or maybe it's a disability, or maybe it's something that is shared. Because I think so much about the Black experience is struggle, that until you meet other white women that have struggled in any kind of capacity, but that struggle has identified them strongly or strongly shaped their identity, it makes it so much easier. When I speak to other white families that grew up in big families, oh, you're one of six, I'm one of seven. What? You automatically get it. You know what it means when like money is tight, or groceries are tight, or like, or you got hand-me-downs. You know what I mean? Like, there's something about these connections that just I feel like it's not about misery loving company. I don't want it to be seen as that. I think it's about, there's something about being able to share a struggle with someone, whether you've overcome it or not, that builds intimacy and trust because you share a vulnerability, or about a vulnerability, and you can give care in that particular space and see that as a human being. And that's where my strongest relationships have come from, and cut across race, age, or class. It's because of that, our shared faith typically, and struggle.
Yeah, it's good.
And just like putting my pastor hat on, right? Like that is that invitation from Christ for all of us, right? Is to own our limits, to own the places that we need to invite Christ in, that we need each other, that we can't do this alone. We're not supposed to do it alone. And that we're each like gifted to be a part of something bigger. And so I just, I do wonder, as I've just been listening to that, the thing that you take for granted in as like a white person of taking up space, of like, I'm not weak. I can go forward. I can do all of these things. It's expected. It's like the path that was laid out for me. And unless you have something that stops you in your tracks, that just like disrupts that narrative, you don't have to stop. And so I just, I appreciate your willingness to remind us that like trust is built through shared vulnerability that allows the fullness, like for all of us to be our full selves. None of us are our full selves when we're like our strongest. No, we're actually our full selves when we're the most vulnerable. But it does take like extra work, given the historical context and the present manifestation between Black women and white women. And we haven't even like introduced what this is like for other women in this conversation. So anyway, I just appreciate that reminder and the way you laid that out and invited us in. I have some questions from the chat if you guys are open to that.
Sure.
Okay. Pastor DeAndre would love to hear about your experience as Black women navigating white space, as well as the trauma of gender inequality in Black space. Have you seen it in the last few years with the attention given to the Black Lives Matter movement?
So I'm going to answer the second question, the second part of the question first. The gender inequality within the African American community. Because I'm a pastor, I feel like I experienced that immediately. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done in the African American community as they recognize and value the voice of Black female leaders in the church. And so, you do experience that. You experience that separation. I can remember being at a conference, and the first year I went, I was a pastor, but I was ignored when I stepped into the room. And these are with, African American pastors. I was ignored when I walked in the room. No one spoke to me. I didn't know where. So I walked up and someone asked, "Am I in the right place?" And they said, "Yes." "Oh, okay. Do I just sit anywhere?" He said, "Yeah, sit anywhere." So I sat down. I sat by myself. No one sat at my table. And when someone did sit at my table, it was another African American woman who was a pastor, and it was a youth leader who sat with me. And so it was interesting. The second year I came again. This time I was with my husband, and immediately, "Oh, Pastor Dani, is this your husband? Hey, how are you? Oh man, well, nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you." I was validated. Oh, because my husband is here. Now the call on my life that God gave me, the fact that God said, "You are my chosen leader," because I'm with my husband now, that makes a difference. Those are the types of things that I experience in in gender inequality. Even the comments, or not even comments, even the conversation around Black Lives Matter. It's almost like Black male lives matter. That's the narrative that's being told. It's not as much all Black lives matter. Black female, Black male, that I think that's what I've experienced is being a pastor. I don't experience it as much because I pastor at an all-white church, predominantly white church. I don't experience that. They called me to their church, a Black woman, and I made sure they knew. Y'all know I'm not,
Clear.
Like, you gonna get all of this. No, we want it. We okay. I like to change my hair up too. You know that, right? Is that only a problem? Like, I just wanted to make sure that they were comfortable with all of me. And they were, and I didn't have that issue. It was unfortunately amongst those that look like me that I experienced the most of that from, for sure.
I get it a lot in my profession. So being a historian, especially of the 19th century, it's dominated by white men. You think of your classic Civil War historian, they don't look like me. And so I've definitely gotten a lot of shade, is what you call it when you go to, speak at conferences and things of that nature. And they give your introduction and they, either mispronounce your name or mispronounce the title of your book, or they botch it, or one person, I remember he was like, "Yeah, I forgot your introduction, but I think you won like 3 teaching awards." I don't know how that happens. But anyways, I was like, wow, way to dismiss me. It was just so, it's gotten to the point where I introduce myself. So let me tell you who I am and what I do, because I don't want you to have to set me up for being insignificant. So that's definitely, I'm never always clear what has a more dominating impact on my life, my sex or my race, because sometimes it's both. And for a while it was also my youth. Can't say that. But it was hard to tell like why I was being dismissed or sort of like talked down to, like, oh, that's cute, and no one was really cool to take your advice or what have you. But I will say the last part of that question, or maybe it was the first part, was about like the Black Lives Matter.
Have you seen a shift in the last few years with attention given to Black Lives Matter?
I've absolutely seen a shift. I've absolutely seen a shift. And at first I was really optimistic by it, and now I'm troubled. And I say I'm troubled because a lot of these things that we saw happen last summer, the taking down of the Confederate flag and like taking down of statues and all of this, like very symbolic, very little of it was structural or systemic or substantive. Yeah. A lot of it was symbolic change. And some of it was just like, that's all you had to do. Like, I just, so much of this is not even about race. It's just about what makes money or what's good marketing. And so at first I was optimistic, and now I'm just like, this is all just about dollars and cents. And so, and that to me is a little demoralizing to know that like your value as a Black person is dependent upon whether or not it's good marketing or whether or not it's, good for business. That's,
or good for either party.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm just gonna sit with that for a little bit, but not here because I'll keep the questions coming. Gary asked, what was the thought process, Dani, for you about going to work? And he wrote as a multi-ethnic church, but you identified it as a predominantly white church as opposed to going to serve at a Black church. Kellie mentioned a bit about feeling safe at Highrock, but were there other considerations for you? Kellie, I think you expounded on that a little bit for yourself. He's asking so that we as a church can better understand and take steps to simplify that process.
Yeah. So I was like I said, I raised in a Black church. So I've spent all my life in a Black church. And so in Atlanta, I served in a Black church. And when my really good friend of like, at that time, 6 years, reached out to me with, I think prior to that, I'd shared with him that I felt God leading me into full-time ministry. I was a teacher at that time, and I felt God leading me into full-time ministry. And I shared with him and asked him to pray. And then a few years later, he approached me about the position at his church. And I prayed about it a lot, and I looked up the community, and I saw the demographic, and that African Americans were about 3% of the population. I visited the church and saw, I counted the number of Black faces that I saw, like 1, 2, oh, there goes one over there, 3, my husband and I. But it was something about their heart for wanting to grow. It was something about their honesty and their vulnerability in saying, I think we have the white suburban connection in our ministry. We got that. We got it down pat. We lack in engaging in those who live in our community, specifically the Latino community, the African Americans that live and that commute into our community. We lack there. We realize that we have some places that we need to learn and grow. And we also realize that if we want our church to be a place where all can feel welcome, we can't just say it. There's some action step has to happen for that to feel like I'm welcome. And whether, we want to believe it or not, when I see someone who's not white a part of a space, I immediately feel welcome. I feel like, oh, okay, I belong here. I can come here. And, my heart has always been for connecting groups bringing people together. And that's how God has wired me as well. I'm a gap filler. I'm a bridge. I feel like that's who God called me to be. And so it only made sense for me to say yes to this call. It didn't come without sacrifice though, because praise and worship, I was a worship leader at my last church. And if you've ever attended Black church, if you ever saw it on TV, if you ever listened to gospel music, it's something different. SCCM. It's something different that you feel on the inside. It's something different. And I don't get that. I don't get that something different.
Yeah.
Well, I get something different, but not that something different. Right. I don't get that at my current church. But what I do get is validation that there's a call on my life. What I do get is supported in my ministry. What I do get is a community of people that want to walk and want to serve and want to hear and want to listen and want to grow together. Yeah. And if I had to pick and choose, I will pick that all day, and I'll just put more gospel music on my Spotify or gospel music on a YouTube list, and we'll watch TV, we'll watch church services on TV, or we'll go visit another church in the evening because there's value there. And so, when you think, but going back to your question, what is it, so that we can be careful about how we engage and make sure that we're doing it the right way. I would make sure that you know what that means, though, because not only are you're bringing someone like me or bringing someone of color into your staff or to your community to say you're welcome, you have to do the work to make them feel welcome. You have to do the work. It's not on me to make myself feel welcome. It's on you to make the other people say welcome. So like Kelly said, that her and her husband, they're hospitality. They love hospitality, right? They love having people over. It's not the guests that come. It's the responsibility to know where to hang their coat, when it's time to sit down for dinner. Are we sitting outside to eat? Are we inside to eat? No, that is Kelly's and her husband's job. Oh, let me take your coat. Oh, have a seat here. Oh, can I get you something to drink? Oh, we're going to have your favorite meal today. Is it too cold for you? What can I do? Like, it's you have to go out your way. Almost like, the person has to say, okay, you're doing too much. Okay, I'm good. You want them to experience that. That's what you want them to experience. And what happens is when people of color come into white churches thinking that they're coming to be welcome, you're saying, yes, you're welcome, but there's little to nothing that we're doing to accommodate that group of people that are coming. Because what you're actually saying is, yes, come into my space and be like me. That's what we're doing. We're not saying, come, bring your whole self and let us experience your culture while you're experiencing ours. Let's experience life together. And so I think that some conversations would have to be held to make sure you know what that means. Because when you bring someone of color into white space, things will shift, things will change. The way they experience theology is very different. The way they pray it may be different. The way they sing, the way they worship, it's different. It's not worshipful. It's just a different form of worship. And we serve a big God who receives it all. He wants it all. Give it all to me. Whether you raise your hands or you sit and you bow your head, he wants it all. He receives it all. And I think that that's what happens in, the churches that want to be multi-ethnic, want to be multicultural. They don't allow space for multicultural worship and things like that. So you just need to know what that means and be okay with being uncomfortable.
I know it's about 10 after 9. I have 2 more questions. Is that okay? Or do you need to wrap it up here?
I'll be quick.
Okay. No, I'm fine, but I know you got babies and Dani is doing some other stuff tonight even. As she is is hosting her own Black History Month celebrations. So I want to just honor everybody's time here. Joy asked, do you feel like you can automatically trust other Black women?
No.
So how are you going to be quick about this one, Kelly?
No, I won't necessarily say why I say that, but you have to test every water. Like at the start of this, I said, there are some people who are happy to be the only Black people in the room. You know, they like being the only, because they feel it gives them some sort of clout or power or whatever. I've never liked that. And I've, in my profession, I can immediately tell when I gravitate toward the other Black person in the room and they gravitate toward the other white person in the room. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, okay, you're not fam. You know, not everybody went to a HBCU, you know, like, and so, no, I don't. There are some, now it's not often, but there are some white women I have much closer relationships than other Black women. But I will say that my primary closest best friends are typically my sisters, but like are other Black women. But it doesn't mean that just because you're a Black woman, you have an in. Like Candace Owens and I would not be friends, you know, like, but that doesn't mean, you know, but I think we need to qualify that. It's not an automatic. And just like for white women, it's not an automatic dismissal either.
I think I would say that if my space is my house, with white women, I might look through the peephole. With Black women, I open my door wide. Mm-hmm. But no one's just coming in. That's just, no one has full access just to walk right on in my house. Yeah. But I do open the door a little quicker with like, oh, okay, girl. Yeah. Oh, nah, we're gonna close that door. So real. Peephole. She seemed cool enough. Crack it open. Oh, you're cool. Open the little wide. Girl, come on in. Like it's you know. So
true. It's so true.
That's a helpful analogy. Thank you.
I'm visual.
Our last question for tonight, from Tiffany, when white space is being decentered by practicing allies, what role does reparations play? And what does that feel or look like for you?
Can you repeat that question?
When white space is being decentered,
okay,
by practicing allies, what role does reparations play? What does that feel or look like for you?
You know, I don't think I've ever really been in that space. Where I've been in spaces where whiteness has been decentered, where white people aren't dominating the conversation or setting the tone or the pace of the environment. But reparations is completely different from that. Stepping back and saying, I'm gonna let you take this, right? Like that's completely different from, I want to repair the harm that has been done. I have not experienced that. And I don't necessarily know what it looks like. So I don't know. But I will say I'm a fan of reparations. Like I know what I think it isn't very much, but that's a hard question. But I think I should be clear, just because I haven't experienced it, or just because I have a hard time articulating what it might look or be like, does not mean that it should not be accomplished or sought or pursued, or do you know what I mean? Like, I think that we've been at this for like 400 years. So there are no easy answers, but I don't know. Dani, I mean, what do you think it looks like reparations are? It's not just, I mean, it's a check, but it's not just a check, right? Like, I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot of things.
You know, I think I've experienced that through being in this anti-racism group that I'm a part of, working group that I'm a part of, where I've actually seen and experienced white people coming together to with other people of color to do the work of repairing. And first things first, helping our clergy to understand what part they played in this, because, you know, along with the narrative of racism, Christianity has followed right along in that same narrative. And how has the faith community played a part in this? And so I've seen it, and, you know, I think of what's her name, Dean Michelle Clifton. Yes, she would be an example of someone who I would think, what I would see as playing a role in that. She does that well. She definitely does. And when she's the dean of faculty for North Park, so at the same time she's now helping others to do the same. And so I mean, she again, and again, she's also in that line of, I ain't never met no white woman like you before. She is that. She's definitely, I love how you explained it, Kelly. More than she's more than just, I'm gonna let you take this one. She is, I'm gonna let you take this one, and while you're taking this one, I'm gonna do the work over here to make sure everybody else gonna make sure that you take that one too. Like that's how she has functioned, and to be in a group with her, to learn from her has definitely been a blessing for me. And I just pray every day that she touches more people that look like hers lives, that there is change. You know, my hope is that my daughter, when she gets my age, she's not having these same conversations that we're having. That is my prayer. And that's why, that's another reason why I said yes to my church. Because I want to be a part of the work to help make sure that my daughter's future doesn't look the same. That's what my mom was hoping. I don't know what my mom's experience feels like right now. Like, I did all this work, and this is where we are. I don't want to feel that. I want to say, oh, I did all this work, and look at my daughter. You don't know what racism is, child. I would love it. I would, or my grandchildren. They say, what's racism, Grandma? Oh, don't worry about it, baby.
Something of the past.
Right, something of the past. We're not even gonna throw that seed in the atmosphere.
I think that's what we all want. You know, we all want to put down this burden. You know, we all want to, and to be honest, we all got more important stuff to do like, than, you know, sit around oppressing other people. Like, there's so much more work that can be done. And Toni Morrison talks about that. Racism is a distraction. It's a gross distraction from who we are meant to be and what we are supposed to be doing. So, yeah, I agree.
Well, anyway, I'm just so grateful for you guys, for showing up, for leaning in. I'm just taking away from this, like, that invitation that, like, there is a shot at that place of, like, putting down that burden, right? But it doesn't come without work. And so it is that recognition of, like, the flourishing for all of us comes through working together. And from learning from the ways that you all do that. I learn from you all the time in the ways that you embody your whole selves with truth. And you give so much grace. So I'm thankful for you. This is a blessing, I know, to the listeners that were gathered here tonight. So thanks for your time.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you for
thank you, friend.
If those of you who are watching are interested in experiencing more of what has been described here about, like, the Black church, or learning about soul food and, like, cooking, or just hearing from other leaders within the denomination who are young, gifted, and Black, I would invite you to drop in the comments. Maybe Abby, you could drop the picture image that we have of Pastor Dani's
yeah.
schedule. She is hosting an entire like month of events for Black History Month that we would love to invite you to go and participate with her. So we are putting a link to her schedule of events. If you're on the East Coast, it means like you'll get to go to these events and go to sleep like very late. Or but anyway, I am excited about them. I think that like a couple of you asked about my shirt. One of the reasons that I like really loved this shirt is because not all of Black History Month is about the struggle. Like this is like about the celebration. This is about the joy. Like I hope you see this in like these women's faces. Like they are people of joy and laughter and exuberance. And so as a not Black person, I've learned so much about how to celebrate. And
What's your shirt say? Black lives, love.
and love and
Yay, I love that. Okay, I need that shirt.
Yeah, me too.
I'm an artist in Chicago. But so anyway, if you are looking for a way to celebrate, go do this with Pastor Dani. And I promise you'll have a good time and you'll learn something. So anyway, ladies, thank you so much. Love to you. And we'll chat again sometime soon.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.